What if the person you thought was just another easy target turned out to be the one pulling all the strings? In the sleepy town of Crestwood, Tennessee, two white cops thought they'd scored a quick win when they pulled over a black woman on a quiet night, pinning a crime on her she didn't commit. They smirked, cuffed her, and dragged her away, believing they'd buried her in their web of lies. But here's the twist they never saw coming. She wasn't just any woman. She was a force they couldn't control, and the truth she carried was about to explode everything they knew. How far would you go to frame someone? And what happens when they fight back with secrets of their own? Stick around for this wild ride. It's a story you won't forget. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe if you love gripping tales of justice and revenge. Your support keeps these stories coming. Let's get started. The night draped over Crestwood, Tennessee, like a heavy blanket, the kind of quiet that amplified every rustle of leaves and chirp of crickets. The small town streets were deserted, bathed in the faint glow of sodium streetlights that flickered intermittently. Behind the wheel of her silver Toyota sedan, Maya Jackson drove with a steady hand, her sharp eyes scanning the road ahead. The dashboard clock blinked 12:47 a.m., its green digits a silent reminder of the long hours she'd put into her latest mission. As a CIA operative, Maya had spent weeks undercover in Crestwood, infiltrating a local trafficking ring that had eluded authorities for months. Now, with the evidence secured, she was ready to vanish into the night, leaving no trace of her presence. She approached a lonely intersection on the outskirts of town, where a weathered stop sign stood crookedly against the dark sky. Maya slowed her car, her foot pressing the brake pedal with practiced precision. She came to a complete stop, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, her breathing even. Years in the field had honed her instincts. She noticed everything. The faint creak of the sign swaying in the breeze, the distant hum of a power line, the stillness that felt almost too perfect. Satisfied, she signaled left and eased the car forward. Before she'd gone 50 feet, red and blue lights erupted behind her, slicing through the darkness. The shrill wail of a siren shattered the silence, echoing off the empty storefronts lining the road. Maya's pulse didn't spike. Panic wasn't in her nature. She glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the patrol car close in, its headlights casting stark shadows across her dashboard. With a calm that belied the situation, she guided her sedan to the shoulder, turned off the engine, and reached into the glove box for her license and registration. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried, as if this were just another routine moment in her day. Two officers stepped out of the squad car, their silhouettes stark against the flashing lights. Officer Derek Hayes, a towering figure with broad shoulders and a stern jaw, led the way, his boots crunching on the gravel. His partner, Officer Paul Grayson, followed close behind, shorter and wiry, with a swagger that screamed overconfidence. Their navy uniforms bore the Crestwood PD insignia, badges glinting faintly as they approached her window. "Evening, ma'am," Hayes said, his voice carrying a clipped, authoritative edge. He angled his flashlight into the car, the beam sweeping across Maya's face and the interior, lingering just long enough to feel intrusive. "Do you know why we pulled you over tonight?" Maya met his gaze without flinching, her dark eyes steady. "No, officer," she replied evenly. "I wasn't speeding, and I stopped at the sign back there." Hayes's lips twitched into a smirk, a hint of condescension flickering in his expression. "Actually, you rolled right through it. That's a moving violation. License and registration, please." She handed over the documents, her fingers brushing the paper with a calm that seemed to unsettle him. Hayes examined them, his brow creasing slightly as he read. "Maya Jackson. Local address," he muttered, his tone sharpening. "Folks like you always think you belong here." He passed her papers back, his smirk tighter now. "Stay in the car," he ordered, before turning to join his partner. Through her side mirror, Maya watched them confer near her trunk. Grayson pointed at something, his voice low and conspiratorial, while Hayes nodded, their exchange too practiced to be spontaneous. A flicker of unease stirred in her chest. Not fear, but a honed instinct that screamed setup. She tightened her grip on the wheel, her mind already racing through possibilities. Hayes returned, his face now a mask of grim authority. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. We've got reason to believe you're in possession of contraband." Maya tilted her head slightly, her voice steady but laced with quiet defiance. "Contraband? I think you've got the wrong person." "We'll see about that," Hayes snapped, gesturing for her to exit. Grayson popped the trunk with a theatrical flourish, revealing a small black bag sitting conspicuously near the edge. Well, he said, his tone dripping with mock surprise. "What do we have here? Looks like powdered trouble." Maya's eyes flicked to the bag, then back to the officers. It wasn't hers. She'd have bet her life on it. The car had been clean when she left her safe house hours ago. This was planted, and they were betting on her folding under pressure. "You're making a mistake," she said softly, stepping out as ordered. Her posture relaxed but her senses razor-sharp. Hayes chuckled, a hollow sound. "Tell it to the judge. You're under arrest for possession with intent to distribute." Grayson moved in with cuffs, snapping them onto her wrists with a smug grin. As they led her to the squad car, Maya's mind catalogued every detail. Their overconfidence, the bag's convenient placement, the rehearsed rhythm of their actions. They thought they'd scored an easy win, a routine frame job to pad their stats. They had no idea who they were dealing with, or the storm they just unleashed. The Crestwood police station loomed ahead, a squat brick building with peeling paint and buzzing fluorescent lights that cast a harsh glare over the cracked linoleum floors. Maya Jackson sat in the back seat of the squad car, wrists cuffed, her face a mask of calm as officers Derek Hayes and Paul Grayson pulled into the lot. The ride had been tense but quiet, broken only by the occasional crackle of the police radio and Hayes's taunting glance in the rearview mirror. "Not so tough now, huh?" he'd said, smirking, fishing for a reaction. Maya didn't bite. She'd faced worse than his petty jabs. Inside, the night shift officers lounged at their desks, sipping stale coffee and trading lazy banter. Hayes strode in with a swagger, tossing the black bag onto the counter like a trophy. "Caught her with this," he announced, his voice loud enough to draw eyes. Grayson grinned, leaning against the wall. "Right in the act, too. Easy pickings." Maya scanned the room as they marched her to processing. Old security cameras perched in the corners, a cluttered bullpen, and a young officer at the front desk who looked up with a flicker of hesitation. His name tag read, Officer Ryan Tate. He fumbled with the fingerprint scanner, his eyes darting to her composed expression. "Name?" he asked, his voice softer than the others. "Maya Jackson," she replied evenly. "Occupation? Freelance analyst," she said, keeping it vague but truthful. Tate nodded, typing quickly, but she caught the unease in his posture. Something about her didn't fit the usual script. Hayes snorted, leaning over the counter. "She's got a smart mouth. Let's see how long that lasts in lockup." They led her to a small cell, cold concrete walls, a metal bench bolted to the floor, bars casting long shadows. Grayson lingered as the door clanged shut, studying her. "You don't look scared," he said, almost puzzled. "Should I be?" Maya replied, her tone cool and unyielding. He muttered under his breath and walked off, leaving her alone. Maya settled onto the bench, exhaling slowly. She wasn't just a detainee, she was a CIA agent. And this was child's play compared to her usual ops. Hidden in her jacket's lining was a tiny tracker, a lifeline to her team. She shifted subtly, pressing it with a faint click. The signal was sent. Her people would come. Until then, she'd play the part, calm, unremarkable, while watching every move. In the break room, Hayes and Grayson clinked coffee mugs, laughing. "She's a cool one," Grayson said, shaking his head. "Thinks she's above it all." "She'll break," Hayes replied, smirking. "Evidence is airtight. No one's digging her out of this." Tate, passing by, caught their words. The arrest nagged at him. The bag's convenience, her steady demeanor, their glee. He returned to his desk, pulling up her file. Basic info, no priors. But her calm wasn't normal. Doubt crept in, a quiet whisper he couldn't shake. A thin sliver of dawn slipped through the high, narrow window of Maya Jackson's cell, painting faint stripes across the cold concrete floor. She hadn't moved much during the night, sitting upright on the metal bench, her dark eyes half closed in a meditative stillness. Sleep was a luxury she'd long trained herself to forgo. Her mind stayed sharp this way, replaying the night's events like a chess game in progress. The fake stop sign violation, the planted bag, the officer's smug certainty. It wasn't a random shakedown. It was deliberate, a pattern she'd seen before in corrupt small-town precincts. She leaned back, her fingers brushing the tracker's edge. She remembered her first case. A teenager framed, his eyes pleading as the cuffs snapped on. Never again, she'd sworn. Not tonight. The station stirred awake outside her cell, the hum of voices and clatter of footsteps signaling the morning shift. Officer Derek Hayes appeared at the bars, clipboard in hand, his smirk as sharp as ever. "Morning sunshine," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Bail hearings this afternoon. Don't get comfy. Judges around here don't take kindly to traffickers." "Good to know," Maya replied, her voice soft but steady, her gaze locking onto his. His smirk faltered for a split second, unsettled by her calm, before he turned and strode off. At the front desk, Officer Ryan Tate wrestled with a growing unease. He'd processed dozens of arrests in his short time on the force, but Maya stood out. She wasn't scared or belligerent, just patient, like she was waiting for something. He pulled up her arrest report on his computer, failed to stop at sign, exhibited nervous behavior, consented to search. The words felt too polished, too convenient. Frowning, he glanced at the cell feed on his monitor. She sat still, almost statuesque, her composure unnerving. Something was off, and it gnawed at him. Maya, sensing the shift in the station's rhythm, made her move. When the hallway cleared, she adjusted her posture slightly, her hands resting casually in her lap. The camera outside her cell was an outdated model, grainy, likely unmonitored in real time. The tracker pulsed silently, its signal cutting through to her team. She trusted them implicitly. They'd be watching, waiting for the right moment. Miles away, in a plain office with no markings, a phone buzzed on a desk. A voice answered, calm and clipped, signal received. Location confirmed. "We're mobilizing." Back at the station, Hayes and Grayson lounged in the break room, coffee steaming in their mugs. "She's done," Hayes said, leaning back. "No one's coming for her." "She's too quiet," Grayson muttered, a flicker of doubt creasing his brow. "Forget it," Hayes snapped. "It's a slam dunk." Tate lingered nearby, overhearing their bravado. The bag, her demeanor, their confidence. It didn't add up. He approached her cell, hesitating. "Did you really consent to that search?" he asked quietly. Maya tilted her head, studying him. "What do you think, Officer Tate? They're betting on you staying silent." He flinched, retreating to his desk, her words echoing in his mind. The station's air thickened, tension brewing beneath the surface. Maya waited. The cracks were showing. Midday sunlight filtered through the station's grimy windows, casting patchy light across the bullpen where officers typed reports and answered phones in a lazy rhythm. Maya Jackson sat motionless in her cell, her posture unchanged, senses attuned to the subtle shifts around her. She could feel it, the air growing heavy, the faint hum of something big approaching. Her tracker signal had been live for hours, and her team was meticulous about timing. She trusted them to strike when the iron was hot. At his desk, Officer Ryan Tate's fingers hovered over his keyboard, his screen glowing with old case files tied to Hayes and Grayson. He dug deeper, minor stops escalating to drug charges, mostly targeting people like Maya, black, unassuming, easy marks. The pattern was blatant, sickening. His stomach churned as he typed a hurried email to an anonymous tip line. "Corruption at Crestwood PD. Check Hayes and Grayson. Please help." He hit send, heart pounding, unsure who'd see it but desperate for action. Outside, a black SUV rolled silently into the station lot. 3 agents stepped out, led by Agent Eric Vaughn, a tall man with a stern face and an FBI badge clipped to his belt. They moved with purpose, entering the station and approaching the desk sergeant. "Federal investigation," Vaughn said, his voice cutting through the chatter. "We need your records and access to the holding cells now." The sergeant, a grizzled man with a permanent scowl, hesitated but waved them through. Tate watched, wide-eyed, as Hayes and Grayson emerged from the break room, their laughter dying mid-sentence. Vaughn's team set up in a cramped office, plugging into the station's network. Files scrolled across their screens. Dozens of arrests with identical narratives, sloppy gaps in procedure. "Systemic," one agent muttered. Vaughn nodded. "Pull it all." Hayes paced near the coffee machine, his voice low. "This about her?" he hissed to Grayson. "Gotta be," Grayson replied, pale. "What do they know?" "Relax," Hayes snapped, but his bravado was thinning. Vaughn strode into the bullpen, his gaze locking onto the pair. "Officers Hayes and Grayson, we need a word." His tone was steel. They followed, shoulders tense, as agents flanked the room. Another agent buzzed open Maya's cell. "Ms. Jackson, you're free to go," he said, respectful but brisk. She rose smoothly, stepping into the hall. Passing Tate's desk, she paused, meeting his eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded, a weight lifting off his chest. In the interrogation room, Vaughn laid out damning evidence. Photos of Hayes and Grayson with the bag before the stop, audio from Maya's device capturing their scheme. "That's fake," Hayes barked, slamming the table. His voice wavered, bravado fading as Grayson shrank, whispering, "We're done." "It's over," Vaughn said coldly. Maya stood at the station's entrance, watching the storm break. Hayes and Grayson were led out in cuffs, their smugness gone. The truth was out, and she'd lit the fuse. The Crestwood police station buzzed with stunned silence as officers Derek Hayes and Paul Grayson were led out in handcuffs. Their heads bowed, the clink of metal echoing down the hall. Maya Jackson stood near the entrance, the crisp afternoon air brushing her face as she watched the scene unfold. Agent Eric Vaughn approached her, his stern face softening slightly. "We've got everything we need," he said. "Your work's done here. Make it stick," Maya replied, her voice steady. Vaughn nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It will." Inside the interrogation room earlier, Vaughn had dismantled their lies with surgical precision. Photos from station cameras showed Hayes and Grayson handling the black bag before Maya's stop. Audio from her hidden device captured their smug plotting. "She's an easy mark. Nobody'll question it." Faced with the evidence, Hayes's defiance crumbled, and Grayson buried his face in his hands, muttering, "We're done." The charges were airtight. Falsifying reports, planting evidence, abuse of power across dozens of cases. The fallout hit fast. By evening, headlines screamed across local news. Crestwood cops busted in FBI sting. TV screens looped footage of the officers' walk of shame, their once proud faces now grim masks. Maya's name stayed out of it, her team's choice to keep the focus on the corruption, not her role. She preferred it that way. The charges against her were dropped within hours, and the station faced a reckoning. Internal reviews unearthed more tainted cases, sparking resignations and promises of reform from a rattled police chief. Officer Ryan Tate stood in the bullpen watching it all. Colleagues shot him mixed looks, some cold, others grateful. His email had tipped the scales, and though he'd never meant to be a hero, he felt a quiet pride. Weeks later, he met Maya at a diner on the edge of town, its neon sign flickering in the dusk. She slid into the booth across from him, a coffee cup steaming in her hand. "Didn't think you'd show," he said, fidgeting. "You earned it," she replied, her faint smile warm but guarded. "Not many would have done what you did." Tate shrugged, staring at his mug. "They offered me a desk job to shut up," he said, his voice firm. "I said no. I'm not that guy anymore." "Good," Maya said firmly. "It mattered to the people they hurt. And to you. That's enough." He nodded, a weight easing. "What's next for you?" "Another fight," she said, her gaze drifting to the window. Months later, Hayes and Grayson stood in court, pleading guilty to a litany of charges. Long sentences followed, their careers and reputations ash. Maya, back in her sparse apartment, packed a bag for her next mission, a dossier open on the table. Her phone buzzed. Vaughn's voice crackled through. "Ready for the next one?" "Always," she said, stepping into the night. The door clicked shut behind her, the dossier tucked under her arm, a shadow moving toward the next battlefield. Because for Maya, justice wasn't a victory. It was a promise. Lesson learned. The lesson from Maya Jackson's story is clear and hits home. Truth can triumph over corruption, but only if you've got the courage to fight for it. Maya didn't just take the hit when those cops framed her. She flipped the script with smarts and steel nerves. It teaches us that justice isn't something you wait for. It's something you seize, even when the odds are stacked against you. No lie's too big to unravel if you refuse to back down. Meaningful message. This tale carries a heavy-hitting message. Power can be twisted and abused, but it's never unbreakable. Hayes and Grayson thought they could bury Maya in their dirty game, but she proved that one person with the right resolve can crack the whole system wide open. It's a wake-up call. Corruption thrives when we stay silent, but it crumbles when we push back. Everyone's got a role in keeping the scales balanced. Personal takeaway. For me, this story's a gut punch and an inspiration all at once. Maya's quiet strength and Tate's unexpected backbone show that heroes don't need to be loud or flashy. They just need to act when it counts. I love how it reminds us that doing the right thing can start small but end up shaking everything up. It makes me wonder, could I be that spark in a tough spot? What about you? Loved this roller coaster of a story? Then stick with us. Follow and subscribe to Story Precious for the latest videos that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Hit that like button, ring the bell, and join the crew. We've got more epic tales of justice and grit coming your way. Don't miss out on the next one.